Story 1. I've been diving into a lot of paranormal stories lately, and it got me thinking about some of my own experiences. This story is 100% true, and while it might not seem like much, it's hands down one of the most terrifying things I've ever been through. Back in 2016, I was in a long-term relationship with a girl whose family lived in a small town in Connecticut. We'd been dating for a little over a year, and I'd met her parents a few times. But this was the first time I was actually going to stay at her childhood home. I was already kind of nervous about staying with her parents and making a good impression, but she kept telling me everything would be fine. The drive down was super scenic, and the town was one of those classic, picturesque colonial places. When we pulled up to her house, it was this beautiful, 3-story old home, half sitting on a hill with a big green yard. Her parents greeted us and were really welcoming, leading us into a cozy foyer with a dark wooden staircase. The house was clearly old, but it had been remodeled with some modern touches, giving it a nice, warm vibe. My ex told me we'd be sleeping in the guest room upstairs because her childhood bedroom only had a single bed. But then she casually mentioned that the house was sort of haunted and that the guest room was where most of the ghostly stuff happened. I asked her to explain what she meant, and she said her brother had slept in that room a few times and experienced some weird stuff. She didn't go into much detail and seemed like she didn't want to freak me out. She did say, though, that everyone in her family had experienced something strange while living in the house. For instance, when her dad was remodeling the kitchen, he was home alone, taking a break when he suddenly felt a strong hand grip his shoulder from behind. He jumped up, but no one was there. Her dad, who's a totally normal, non-superstitious guy, said he thought a spirit was trying to warn him not to make changes to the house. Another time, my ex was home alone with her dog, watching TV downstairs, when she heard loud, banging footsteps coming down the hall upstairs. As the footsteps continued, she could swear she heard someone banging on the walls, slowly approaching the top of the staircase. Her dog ran to the bottom of the stairs, barking like crazy. She grabbed her phone and the dog and ran outside. She called her parents and the police while watching the house from the sidewalk. From where she stood, she could see both entrances, and given how the windows are set up, there's no way someone could jump out of a second-story window without getting seriously hurt. The police searched the house but found no one, and her family just chalked it up to the ghost. There were other smaller spooky things too, like the attic door closing on its own. Even if they put a chair in front of it, they'd come back down to find the door shut. For some reason, that freaked me out the most, and I refused to go up there. Anyway, the actual experience I had happened on my first night staying there. We were settling down to sleep in the guest room, and I remember being a little bothered by the lighting. It just felt off, like it was both too bright and too dim at the same time. I figured I was just tired, so we climbed into bed and slowly drifted off to sleep. Now, I don't know if I was dreaming before this happened, but in the middle of my sleep, a woman appeared in my dream. She was violently angry and started addressing me directly. She showed me the people I loved, my ex, family, friends, and began putting broken glass into their gums, scraping it against their teeth. I was frozen in the dream, unable to react. She told me she was going to torture and kill everyone I cared about and promised that everything she was saying was very real. I tried to wake up, struggling mentally against whatever hold she had on me, and for a moment, I did wake up. I was in bed, sitting in the darkness, but then somehow, the woman from the dream crossed over into my waking world and screamed, "You will never escape." I woke up, for real this time, bolting upright, screaming, and shaking violently. This woke my girlfriend, who immediately tried to calm me down, asking what was wrong. I started crying, trying to explain what had just happened and how terrifyingly real it felt. She reassured me it was just a dream, and I eventually calmed down a bit. I was genuinely scared to go back to sleep, but somehow we both managed to drift off again, and I made it to morning without any further incidents. We stayed in that room a few more times over the years, but I never had a dream like that again. You could probably chalk it up to the power of suggestion, being in a new place, hearing about the ghost activity, but that was the only time I've ever had a true night terror or woken up screaming. I've never had a dream that even comes close to the intensity of that one. I honestly don't know what to make of it. Maybe it was just my brain freaking out, but as a first-timer in that house, it really felt like a warning. Story 2. The world feels unusually quiet as I wake up, clutching my childhood stuffed animal a little tighter than usual. As I gaze into its small, beady black eyes, I find myself wondering if it can see me. Does it know I'm not who I used to be? That I'm bigger now, taller, with lines forming deeper around my eyes, my forehead, and my mouth. Today is my 29th birthday. 29. The number keeps echoing in my mind. It feels heavy, like it's carrying some kind of finality. 29. I can't help but wonder what it's like to live past the numbers that start with a 2, but the thought makes me uneasy. I go through my usual bathroom routine, but today, I pick a special playlist to listen to while I apply my skincare and makeup. It's filled with all my favorite songs, from the ones I loved as a child to the ones I discovered just yesterday. Maybe it will help lift my spirits. At noon, I meet my friends at the restaurant. I can't stop wondering what they're thinking. Do they really want to be here, or do they feel obligated? Are they looking at me differently now? As I take a sip of crystal clear water through one of those oddly shaped straws we like, Sarah tells me not to be so sad. She reminds me of Abigail's 29th birthday, how she was spooked too, but she got through it. Lots of our friends have, after all. I take a moment to observe the other tables. The customers are enjoying a normal day. They don't feel the dread I do. The high school girls gossiping and laughing at their phones have so much more youth ahead of them, and the middle school girls enjoying their frozen desserts have even more. I envy them. I even envy the table of somewhat obnoxious boys who don't seem to worry about anything at all. Emma shares a new anti-aging trick she found on social media. Everyone turns to listen intently, and I see the light in their eyes shift from curiosity to regret as they realize they missed out on using it in their younger years. Quickly, they pull out their small mirrors to examine their faces, mentally noting any new signs of aging they might have overlooked earlier. I think to myself, maybe it would be nice not to worry so much about this sort of thing. The day passes quicker than I expected. Opening gifts, blowing out candles, eating cake, reading messages from friends and family, it all helps me forget my worries for a while. I forget the self-loathing I feel when I look in the mirror, the mix of rage and anxiety that hits when someone asks how old I am, and the sting of tears when I see another snarky comment about my appearance on my latest post. But here I am again, back in the bathroom, removing my makeup. The mask that barely hides what I've become. My childhood stuffed animal is staring back at me again. Remember what Sarah said, I tell myself. If Abigail could do it, so can you. Sarah's bubbly voice echoes in my mind as my stuffy silently pleads with me from beside the sink. It's no different from the straws, the frequent reapplication of SPF, the preventative Botox, or the reminders not to smile too much. And before I even realize it, the pill has moved from the palm of my hand to the back of my throat. Story 3. This wasn't a dream. I know because I'm sitting here right now, alive, and it happened just 20 minutes ago while I was driving. There's this homeless man I always see at the same spot every day. Today, I decided to roll down my window and yell good morning as I drove past him. After that, I took a left at the traffic light and drove about a quarter mile from where I'd just seen him, which took maybe 30 seconds. When I got to the red light, I started looking at my phone, just passing the time. Then I looked up, and there he was, the same homeless man, with his whole face pressed up against my window, staring right at me. I nearly had a heart attack right then and there. my Apple Watch showed my heart rate spiking to 175. I was so freaked out that I floored it, losing traction for a second as I sped off. Now, I'm just sitting in my car, trying to process what just happened. I don't hallucinate. I don't have any mental problems, and I've never had any history of them. I'm a normal person, living a normal life, without any unnecessary stress. I get a solid 8 hours of sleep every night. There's no way that just happened, except it did. I know it did because when I sped off, the car next to me started honking at him as he stood there, right in the middle of the road, while the light was green. And yeah, I'm positive it was the same homeless man. I see him every day, and I've even had conversations with him before. He usually goes on rants about God, the Bible, and the devil. I can barely make sense of what he's saying most of the time, but I just go along with it. I don't know what to do now. Story 4. A couple of months ago, my father came across a story that really got under his skin. It was about a guy who had everything going well for him until one day, the lamp in his room started to flicker a bit too brightly. Then, just like that, the guy wakes up from a coma, realizing that the great life he thought he had was nothing but a dream. It hit him hard, and he fell into a deep depression. When my father heard this story, he couldn't shake it from his mind. He's always been the rock of our family, building a good life for us, but this story stirred something dark in him. He started getting paranoid about whether everything around him was real. It started innocently enough. He began switching off any light source in the house out of fear. At first, it seemed like just a quirk, something harmless. But then, that fear grew. Whenever any of us turned on a light, he would get angry, almost irrationally so. It was like he was terrified that the light would expose some horrible truth. He began doing things to prove that we were real, that everything he'd worked so hard to build was real. He would say things like, "I don't know what I'd do if any of this wasn't real," and the worry in his voice was hard to ignore. Then, one day, one of my siblings turned on a light in a room. My father snapped. He needed proof, and in a fit of desperation, he started punching us. To him, the pain we felt was proof that this life was real. But things only got worse from there. He refused to see a therapist, insisting that he was fine, but we knew better. We were walking on eggshells whenever he was around. The house was always pitch black, and he'd just sit there on the sofa, staring at the wall, lost in his thoughts. One night, I accidentally turned on a light, and he completely lost it. He grabbed a knife and scratched all of us to make sure we were real. He even started smashing things around the house. We were terrified, but no matter what we did, we couldn't reach him. He kept listening to that lamp story over and over again, like he was trying to figure something out. We tried to stop him from hearing it again, but he always found a way. Then, out of nowhere, things seemed to get better. Our father seemed to have moved on from the lamp story, and for a moment, we thought everything was going to be okay. But then, one day, I came home from work, and our house was on fire. My father was standing outside, watching it burn. When he saw me, he just looked at me and said, "I just needed to make sure it was all real." Everyone inside the house died that day. Now, my father is in prison, and he's finally sure that everything is real. He hates it there, but he knows it's real. Sometimes he wishes that a lamp would start flickering brightly, but it never does.